Hi, everybody. I'm Nikki Terzieff. I'm lobbying and advocate for the Oregon Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, and working in partnership with all of you. Boy, did we cover the steering committee there?
Is Sybil joining us, Nikki? I don't see Sybil on yet.
You know, I sent her a quick note that we are, as you all know, we're in the middle of the legislative session, so it may be an on and an off, or we may we may be flying solo. So I guess that's it. So Carrie, who you have alluded to, is the fabulous Sybil Hebb from the Oregon Law Center. Sybil is the introduction that will round out our steering committee and a partner here in the legislative process. So I'm actually sitting in Salem right now. I have co-opted an intern's desk in a rather quiet building. Salem today, the hall's feeling a little bit empty. Monday was a deadline day, and it was actually what marks kind of the halfway point, if you will. And the halfway point means that, hey, your bills, if it was in a House committee, it better be moved out of that original House committee. If it was in a Senate committee, it needs to be moved along. And it can go a couple of paths right now. You can either be from the House committee to the House floor, and then over to the Senate for policy work and the Senate vote, or it could have a price tag attached to it, or it could be a straight allocation. And then what you would see is that your bill leaves the original policy committee and goes to what we call Ways and Means, which is just budget stuff. And that Ways and Means committee right now has a stack of bills just kind of waiting in a short session. Just as a reminder, this is a 35-day legislative session, which we have about 2 weeks left in, which is stunning to me. In a short session, we see often that the decisions get made at a pretty high level. And where normally you would have a big subcommittee process and bills would be moving away and sitting and being discussed and debated, it's that 6-month-long session. This time around, we see about 4 people making the decisions. It doesn't mean that the other folks are not important, but it does mean that, excuse me, that we need to focus our efforts and our energy on communicating with those 4 people. And just to really put a name on it, we're talking about the presiding officers, the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, and then the co-chairs of Ways and Means, or sometimes they're referred to as the big chairs. The big chairs now are Tana Sanchez. Yay, we always pause and give a big round of applause for Representative Sanchez, who we all know from the movement and working at NIA. And then that's the House side co-chair. On the Senate side is Elizabeth Steiner. She's a family physician. She's out of Northwest Portland. She's over the years been very supportive and understanding of the work that you all do on a daily basis. So what's been really intense, I guess I would say, has now resulted in a Friday that seems to be a pause. Everyone just kind of taking a deep breath. This is a pretty critical moment for us, a pretty crucial moment for us, because in that pause, we're also seeing the decisions being made by those 4 people that I just discussed. You all have come forward and done an amazing job of being active. Each time that we have asked you, please lean in, please be sure to contact your legislator, please be sure to pick up the phone. Hey, can you share a story with us? You've responded, and it's made a difference. We came out of our policy committee on a unanimous vote and moved down to the budget committee. We then started to ask you all with an action alert, like, hey, send in this note. We need some advocacy here. Yesterday, I'm pleased to say, yesterday we saw a vote on our House Bill 4121. Just as a reminder, 4121 is the bill that does we call it current service level, CSL, but the regular world term for it is like stable budget. So we yesterday saw the passage of a bill out of the Public Safety Subcommittee that will take the funds for ODSVS and the Survivor Housing Fund and also our sister programs at the CACs and stabilize it. Excuse me. That means instead of coming back and fighting for it every year, it will be a part of a budget that gets proposed out of the DOJ. Now, That's a good thing. So I'm going to pause and say, yay. When a bill comes out of the subcommittee like that, when a bill gets passed all the way through that budget process down to that subcommittee and it comes out, and by the way, we ended up with a unanimous vote coming out of there, it's pretty much good to go. So I would say, I mean, anything can happen and then, right. But but I think that we should all take a moment and say, yay. And I want to say thank you to each of you and to all of you, because we are looking at a bill that, as long as nobody walks out, we're looking at a bill that will pass and create a funding floor for us from budget cycle to budget cycle to budget cycle. That takes away a huge concern from year to year and now moves us into a position of being able to come back, and instead of looking for these funds at all, now we come back and look for newer funds, bigger funds, and additional funds. We sit right now at a balance of about, I'm giving you an estimate, we sit right now at a balance of about 16 million. So we did try to make some additional asks this session. We wanted to see if we could get another 6 million or so into the coffers, 3 million for ODSVS and 3 million for Survivor Housing Fund. We were not successful in getting it through that bill. But guess what? At the end of session, there's a bill. It's called, well, I guess historically here it's been called the Christmas tree bill, but we could call it the holiday shrub bill, or you could just know that it's the end of the session budget bill where everybody gets their final dollars. We are going to continue to ask for those additional dollars, and it will just have to be focused on that particular bill, that final bill of session. It's going to be anything from our requests to money for a bridge to $1 million to redo the historic theater down in Medford. I mean, it could be anything and everything that gets thrown in there, and we really want to be a part of it with our extra, gosh, let's just even take 2 million, right? We're really going to be out there kind of saying, we know that we need more. Stabilization is great, but we know that we need more. The program's dollars are not stretching as far. They're working to cover some gaps from the feds. And so that's going to be how we talk about this. And we also are going to, I think you all are familiar enough with us by now, we're going to make an ask of you. We're going to ask you to get involved, and we're going to let you know that it's your voice that has made the difference up until this point and what a difference it's made. And now we've got one more ask of the legislature, which means one more ask of you, which is focusing on those additional dollars. As always, we will try and make it as easy as possible, action alerts and plug and play. And what we know is that it is your voice that helps us push these policy outcomes and these funding outcomes over the edge. So don't celebrate just yet, or maybe celebrate halfway, but don't go anywhere. We've still got a little more work to do. The rest of our agenda, and I don't, typically we just kind of talk at folks, but this is I feel like this is kind of an important moment. If there are questions that people would like to put in the chat, or if there's anything that folks from the steering committee would like to add, I'd be very happy to make that space on this funding piece. I'm not seeing folks from the steering committee jumping out of their chairs, so I will.
Nikki, I did ask. I missed it if you said it. Is the continuing funds ODSVS and survivor housing funds, or just one or the one?
Both.
Both. That's awesome. That's incredible. We've had to work every single time to get those survivor housing funds. So that's amazing.
It's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting. And, you guys worked your magic out there and spoke to your legislators and helped us make the case to leadership. And the result was one of the most boring votes I've ever witnessed. It was like, yeah, of course. Yep. Yes, I. Yep. Yes, of course. Yes, I. And then the gavel fell, and it was 30 seconds, maybe. I mean, it was so, did that just happen? I guess that just happened, which is in some ways maybe what we want out of the legislative process, for this to be as smooth as that was. So we're going to continue to ask. Don't forget, second ask of the call. We're going to continue to ask because we want what's kind of, I think, being characterized correctly as a plus up. now that we've got our stable funding. We'd like to get that plus up. So that's HB 4140 for those of you following along at home. We do have a couple of other pieces of legislation, of course, that we have been tracking on, and one is HB 4123. Shannon or Carly, do you want to spend a moment talking about this? Because this is another place for us to clap and wave and say yay.
Before we flap and wave, Shannon, I don't want to, who makes the decisions at the for the holiday shrub bill? Are they the 4 special people? Are they?
They are the 4 special people, and in the next week or so, it's going to be 2 special people. It will be the presiding officers. It will be the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. And so it's Senator Rob Wagner, for any of you who may have a recognition of his name, and then Speaker of the House Dan Rayfield from Corvallis area. Those 2 folks are very quickly going to take that big stack that I was describing and start saying yes, no, yes, no, 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 yes, no. They've asked everybody to take a haircut on whatever your original requests were. If you wanted $1 million, please consider half. They're really being conservative about what they're willing to put forward. Thanks.
Is it time for my flapping now, Nikki?
Yes, yes.
You did have one more question. Somebody
go ahead.
asked, when will that decision be made?
Oh, thank you very much for flagging that. I do a terrible job of like the multitasking of reading and speaking. The decision, a bit nebulous, frankly. I would suspect that either over the weekend or like Monday and Tuesday, we're going to see them making those decisions. And so that means that the rest of the movement of those pieces of legislation would likely start Wednesday. Likely. Who knows? Thanks. Good question. Thank you. Shannon, 3rd time's a charm.
All right, thanks, Nikki. So HB 4123 is the funding bill for the Sane Certification Commission. So again, Sane nurses are the specially trained medical professionals that respond to sexual assault survivors when they show up at hospitals. They provide specialized care, they collect evidence, and this work of the SCC that oversees Sane certification, standards, support, professional development, all the things. We are seeking funding to support that commission in the amount of $400,000 per biennium. That would allow additional staffing and support for that workforce that goes directly to help survivors of sexual assault. That bill is currently also sitting in Ways and Means, waiting for a hearing in the subcommittee on public safety. And you should have seen an alert go out if you're on the listserv for calls to legislators, supports for that as well. It hasn't had its hearing in Ways and Means yet, so your support is very still needed and welcomed. If you could let folks know that this is something you support, an ask you would like to see made for potentially this session and future sessions for ongoing current service level funding, because we know that SAE need is not going to go away after this year. So if you have any questions, I will also drop my email in the chat because I've sort of been being the lead wrangler on this bill. You're welcome to reach out. Let me know if you need any details on who to contact, what to say, or any details on what the bill would do. Happy to provide that to you.
Right on. Great job, Shannon. Thank you. All right, so we've talked about funding and funding and funding. One of the other kind of big success stories here is HB 4146. And this is kind of what we've been referring to as Representative Hartman's, we need to come up with a better moniker, I think, but the victims bill. This one is on its way, bipartisan support. It came out of committee. It did not have a price tag, and so it went straight to the floor, the House floor. There's a floor 1-pager. Now, when it comes out of the House floor, and gosh, that may have been the case already. I'm sorry. I will ask one of our steering committee members maybe for a little quick OLIS support here. But what we end up seeing is that this bill will pass out of the House floor, bipartisan support, I'm confident. Then we'll be over in the Senate. So there will be an opportunity for us to testify on the bill or to submit written testimony on the bill in the Senate, HB 4146. This bill is the bill that has restraining orders without borders in it. My notes are a little scrappy here. And a couple of other provisions that along the way we've supported. You have seen an action alert for this amongst some of the others. We asked you all to click through some links and give some supports to it. And we're probably going to do that again. So there's a third ask. I guess I've gotten it in a little bit early this time. There's the third ask to pay attention to our quick email alerts. It all moves very quickly as you're seeing. And so it's important that we are able to be nimble in that. There is also a bill that was coming out from Kevin Mannix, and this was kind of an updated to the digital world, a fine tuning of the stalking statutes. And this is House Bill 4156. That bill's gone on to Ways and Means. It did have a price tag, so that bill has gone on to Ways and Means, and we're going to wait and see what happens. There is another bill that we've been a part of, and that's HB 4097. That's an expungement bill, and it's kind of modernization of the expungement statutes. There was a big reform that was passed in 2021. There were some things that were good. There were some things that were bad. There were some things that this bill allowed us an opportunity to address. And Phoebe, if you're comfortable speaking to this, or Shannon, if you would like to at all, I think my broad brushstroke is we were able to get this bill amended, and has a lot of different kind of stakeholders and perspectives that have been brought to the table, including ODAA, some of the systems-based folks that work in the DV space and the survivors space. We had Shannon Rose and BB participate in the work group. Sybil was there for the Law Center. This has been kind of a long and winding conversation, but we are now down to the final amendment, and that's reflective of what we asked for and was agreed to by the proponents of the bill. And this bill is sitting in House Rules. It does some things, it takes some things into consideration around contempt charges for persons crimes, and has a few other ticky-tacky points to it in terms of what could be important to address and keep in mind for the safety of survivors. The other side of that same coin are changes that we know will be beneficial for survivors as well. For instance, it's a waiving of fees and fines. So if after 10 years you're still unable to pay your fees and fines, those fees and fines no longer stand in the way of an expungement. And perhaps you need to expunge your contempt charge for it's a failure to appear because somebody didn't feel comfortable or safe going to court. I think there's some other pieces to it, and I see Rowan, thank you. Every once in a while, these bills are being flashed up in the chat. I would encourage you all to take a look at that bill file. The final amendment for that bill is not online yet, but it will be shortly, and we're expecting to see that bill move out of the House Rules Committee on Tuesday. It will have a price tag. It will go to Ways and Means. From there, honestly, who knows? But I guess at least we've got a good solid policy foundation for next time. It's good. It was a hard conversation, but a good conversation, and I think that we've landed in the good space for survivors and the other stakeholders who have now aligned on it. There's one piece, campus bill. Carly, is your microphone working? HB 4146. I cannot believe all of this work that now, upon reflection, we've been doing. It's really phenomenal.
I'll try this. Can folks hear me okay?
Yes.
So exciting. Wonderful. Hi all, I'm Carly. Just quick update that has been passed through on a vote to head to Ways and Means, I think for just a quick little budget bump it sounds like they might have, but the campus bill this go around just had a really short amendment to make sure that some of the pieces that weren't working for schools in the last round were captured in this. So there's a -5 amendment that I'll drop here in the chat, but for our purposes for today's meeting, the most important piece is that access to advocacy services will still be a preserved right for students, which was not on the table for all schools, but was something that for some of our programs they might not have had access to. So we're really excited to see that kept in, and just really appreciate Representative Hartman's team and all their advocacy on our behalf with that. So if folks have questions, please feel welcome to reach out. I'll be in the chat as well.
Perfect. And we also have TS, I guess this is another money piece. I may have spoken too soon. There's also some action happening over at DHS around TADVS. There was a request for a rather sizable money increase for the program and for the Survivors Investment Program that's happening over there, or the SIP, some of you may know. I'm not sure if we've got Bridget Budbill with us today at this particular meeting, but there's been a little bit of concern, I think, about the dollar amount. So not surprising, but perhaps disappointing. I don't think it's going to be going for a hearing. And I don't think that the legislature is going to be looking at that amount of funds. Again, just like in the holiday shrub for us, there may be some holiday shrubbery for the TADVS program. And I think that this is a really good marker for us to maybe refocus next session on some of those pieces that we've been talking about over the years in terms of policy changes for that program as well. I think there's some fine tuning that we know that we need to do. In this final minute or two, I think what's important for us to spend a little time on is the Secretary of State report. This, you may all recall, was kind of sprung out of the Secretary of State's office on the very last day of DVAM and has started to kind of permeate into conversations. Legislators have been interested in it. Committees have had reports on it. Melissa, not to put you on the spot, but I think you were able to track a little bit on the most recent hearing. And if you maybe would give us a minute of your assessment and some of the response that you and your team have been incredibly helpful in putting together, that we're going to be using as a guide moving forward.
Yeah, sure. So happy Friday, everyone. Yeah, there was a hearing a week ago or so regarding the Secretary of State's advisory report, where the Secretary of State auditors presented the report and sort of their opinions on what needs to be done in the system or what the report illuminated. Thanks to you all and to many others, we had a response prepared, and the chair of that committee had submitted our response into the record. So I don't know, Amanda, maybe you can put a link just to that to where that hearing was, because the response is linked in there. But because of the feedback everybody gave, we had a really solid sort of 4-pronged response to the Secretary of State's advisory report that, as Nikki mentioned, we'll be figuring out how we create talking points and use that moving forward for our other legislative priorities. But I was grateful to see and hear that many of the committee members sort of accepted that there's a lot of expertise in this group, and that the response that we provided and the direction that we were giving should be lifted up as sort of a guiding path to how they respond to the Secretary of State's advisory report. I still think there'll be a ton of work to keep that message going, but I'm glad we had something to put out there, and it really highlighted the need for ongoing funding, for direct assistance directly to survivors like IDAs and the survivor housing funds and SIP and those kinds of things. It also talked about making sure that there was a well-funded, coordinated response at a regional and local level. So instead of just creating a new bureaucratic statewide office, that we made sure that our coordinated efforts regionally and locally were supported, and then that could funnel up to a statewide response. And then it responded to some of the need to have better data, to have better training for judges, those kinds of things for everybody to take a look at. So more to come, but thank you all for your input on it so far. We really did get a lot of feedback, and we worked that feedback many times over the last couple of months. So I think it's pretty solid.
Thank you. Quite solid. And it's going to be, as we mentioned, a vehicle, a tool, something that we will utilize in conversations moving forward. I think coming out of that hearing, Melissa, that you're referring to, we heard Senator Salmon, Janine Salmon out of Hillsborough and Forest Grove area in Washington County. We know she's engaged in our issues, and we know that she earnestly wants to do good things. And so we need to make sure that those good things are things we think are good. So this will be helpful for that. 11:59. I can't believe it. I know, and I just spoke at you all. But these are really important updates, and these are really heartening updates. And I'm finding myself a little emotional on a Friday after a deadline here. thank you for your help. It's made the difference.